I guarantee that trials will come, and as well, a good chance we may fail. But from there, God can help us back up. Welcome. Glad to see you're here with us study. Today, we're actually going to get into the book of James. Turn, if you would, to James chapter 1, verses 1 to 5 as we go through these things. I like to share right off the top of the bat that we have blessed the man who endures temptation, for when he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life which the Lord has promised to those who love him. If we love the Lord, we're faithful to the Lord, and we, are willing to keep going. Those are all the ingredients that we need to please the Lord. Certainly, the goal of the accomplishment of pleasing the Lord, whether it's obeying the Lord or whether it's an actual skill that's needed, that pleases God too. But the process the Lord is approving of. And that's always part of what's going on with testing. Don't forget that. He wants to give you approval, and he's generous with his approval. Okay, he's generous. And so keep that in mind. Now, James, of course, is a bondservant of God, and he wrote this letter to the 12 tribes that were scattered around. Now, he is a bondservant. We know the theme of James is to have a devoted service that meets God's approval, and James wants to show that to us. And that certainly is what's going on. He's expanded his ministry. Here's a guy that started out listening to the apostles. He was converted by his brother himself. He started to practice the teaching and preaching that he learned from others. And now, some 15 years later, he's actually overseeing a lot of churches. He's grown in his maturity. So that's what's going on. In verses 2 to 3, my brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. Okay? And verse 4. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be mature, perfect, and complete, lacking in nothing. Okay, now, when we move on then to verse 5, okay, but if you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives liberally. He's a liberal giving God. He's not stingy, and without reproach, and it'll be given to him. So every problem that you have, every trial that you have, has its own wisdom that it needs. Every one of them. Okay? And so God is ready to give you that wisdom. We certainly can learn a lot from God's Word. Okay, and remember, with every trial, there's a real strong possibility, especially if we're new to it, that we're going to fall. All right? We're going to fail. We're on the mat. But the beautiful thing about the Lord is, in the Spirit of the Lord and in the strength of the Lord, he gets us off the mat to take what we've learned from that failing and try again. And the Old Testament is full of people who have failed. The New Testament Gospels gives a story of the disciples who failed trying. And we see the same thing going on in the book of Acts as Paul trains his workers and other people are being trained. People are failing and succeeding, and all kinds of things are going on. To imagine that you and I would never have a failure. You know, you may have heard many a preaching that gives you the idea that, oh no, we don't fail, we succeed. No, that's not what I see and experience. We fail and we end up on the mat. And it's the training that gets you off the mat and ready to go again. So, there is a lot of metaphors that God has given in His Word that help us here. A soldier, an athlete, a farmer, every one of these occupations have their failings. And it's usually at the point of failing that now the instructors feel like the candidate is now ready to be taught. So when you go through basic training, what is it that sergeants do? The first thing they do is they make sure everybody fails. All right? And every one of them hit the mat somewhere. And that sergeant is very good at making people fail. Now, once they fall, the sergeant gets them back up. And now he begins to teach them what they need to do. And then they're trained. And their training helps them through far greater challenges than what they faced at basic training. Okay? These soldiers have to learn what it means to go through battle. People are dying. Everything's going wrong. And it's these soldiers who use their training to get up and meet the challenges of the battlefield. And if they didn't have the training, they wouldn't have been able to do that. It doesn't mean that everybody's going to go through it alive, right? Because they don't. Well, the athlete, a lot of people compete, but only one person gets the prize, And the athlete, he's got to be thinking about getting that prize. That's his goal. But that doesn't mean that he's going to do it. Every athlete that you coach, they're going to fall, and now you have to teach them and train them what they need to have a real game. Okay? A young tennis player, especially guys, they think it's the best thing in the world that they can really hit that ball. They can hit it hard and it goes to the fence. They can hit it hard and it goes over the fence. They hit it hard and it goes up on the roof of a 4-story building. And they think that's the greatest thing in the world. But as far as becoming a good tennis player, they are losing. They are losing, And I had a lot of players, for example, who would hit the ball very hard, and they thought that they wanted to clear that net by about 1 inch so that it would buzz down the line and they could get a winning point. Now, they could do that about 1 out of 10 times, but the other 10 times, they mishit the ball into the net, out of the court, or they gave an easy shot to the opponent, and 9 out of 10 times, they would lose the point. But that one time that they hit it right, that's what they remember, and they think that's just great. As a coach, you got to have them saying, wait a minute. The object here is to win the game. And right now, you are losing very, very badly. In fact, you're a real bad tennis player. You've got to change your game, otherwise you're losing. And I'm not going to play you. So that player who hits very hard, now it's my job to teach them how to play the game to where their shots are falling in and they got control, and eventually they'll win the point because the other player will make more mistakes than they do, And then they will also learn to hit the ball in the right way where it's their advantage. They have to completely change what they're doing. Very hard for them to do. But that's kind of what you learn from sports. Now, people will lose games. And you want your good players to have some experience at losing games so that you can show them what they need to do to become better, and then they become a better player. They obviously will lose less games, but they will also end up playing better players, which again will challenge them to find out what they need to do to become a better player and to win, and be more successful. And the guys that really got into that, and girls, became really good players. But it's a process. But it's that process that helps the coach teach what the game is really about. Okay? And I think that falls with other sports as well. So in James, we see even from David, that he prepared for battle. He prepared his hands. He prepared his fingers. He trusted in the Lord. The Lord was his rock, but he was ready to fight, and he had specific skills. Now, spiritual battles, we have to be trained for, okay? Physical battles, we have to be trained for. You get a sickness, you have to go through the sickness and do the things that you need to do to get through it. It may be very hard, but if you do what's best, what's been learned, it gives you a better chance. Then, that's what you want to do. All right? And some trials we may have all of our life. Okay? I have cerebral palsy. I'm going to have it all my life. It's not going to go away. And I will have more problems because of it. But as I go through these problems, I want to find out the best way to succeed through them. And to do that, of course, I need wisdom. And I need wisdom from God. And a lot of times I need the best insight from medical science. But I take all truth to be from God. But the truth is, we need wisdom in order to get through it. Now, we find, okay, that, here we go. There might be stages that we have to go through. All right? And these stages are kind of interesting. Stage 1, we learn that God will give us as many trials as we need to learn what we need to learn, to grow, to be more mature, and to successfully go through the trial as he wants us to go through it, with the abilities that we need, with the skills that we need to become mature, helping other people, And so James is going to give us all kinds of trials that we can look at. And they're the same kind of stuff that we're going through in our life. God will make them as hard as they need to be, all right, to train us. And there will come a time when the trials are real trials from life, and they have various degrees of difficulty. We're no longer being discipled in the sense of like it was at the beginning, but now these are for real. All right. This isn't just a procedure, but it's a major operation. And we can go through that trial with knowing that God is there to help us through it. A coach does the same thing when he designs practice. He's trying to help the player to both be conditioned and trained for competition so they can be successful. Stage 2. Well, for the Christian, stage 2 is waiting on the Lord, trusting Him. Ready to go through the whole thing. Now, going through the whole thing, difficulty, we may have done with lesser problems before. And as we look back at that, we can see, the Lord was with me through it. And we can see from retrospect with each trial what God wanted to teach us. And then when we get to that more serious trial, we have experience that tells us we can do this again. And God, again, will be with us through it. Whatever the outcome, it isn't always success. Sometimes we're on the mat, okay? But He's going to help us through it. So as a coach, I had to help my players to stay in the moment and have the ability to play and to play as long as they needed to play. They don't play like they used to in the old days when we played add in, add out, add in, add out. You could play 13, 14, 15 games in a set or more, maybe 20. Or I've even played as 25 or 28 sets in a game. They don't do that anymore. They have tiebreakers. But you have to train a player to be able to go 3 games in high school. And for summer goals, I used to tell my players, play 5 sets. Play it often. Don't play it every day, but play 5 sets a couple times a week. And you will always be ready for 3 sets of tennis. And you'll have the endurance that you need to go through it. Now, stage 3, that's the wisdom that we need. The wisdom. We need God's wisdom from His Word. With each goal, with each trial, has its own set of wisdom. And each of the trials that we have in James, they're all different. They each are going to have their own set of wisdom that we need. And if James doesn't quite hit your trial, I can tell you that it's somewhere in the Word of God. But as you get God's perspective on it, you will, you'll be able to grow to maturity through it. You'll be able to see it. And in retrospect, remember that mountain that I taught from once? You're on the mountain, and in retrospect, you're looking at through your telescope, and you're seeing how God had worked. And you go, wow, that's amazing. Even through the biggest hurts and losses, we can have God's perspective. Now, obviously, for coaching, I had to teach the skills and strategies that they need because they had to do this. They have to play on their own. In the summertime, they're not going to have me to coach them. In the matches, I may have to be around 5 or 6 matches. I can't watch every particular match. And, but I have very limited time to coach. Most of the time, the player has to do all of the thinking himself. I like that kind of game. I think today's athletes in many sports are overcoached. Truth is, a player is a quarterback in his position. He's got to be able to manage the game. And if you teach a player to manage the game, they'll make the adjustments right when they need to. And that should be the goal of every coach. To have a player be so dependent on the coach, that's going to miss the boat. Okay, now, after you go through the experience, we have to be able to evaluate that experience. What did we learn from the experience? Were you able to endure it, or did you give up? Was the trial really so negative, or was it a negative experience? What did you learn by it? Remember, much of the Bible, much of this Bible has hundreds of examples of people who failed. It also has many examples of people who succeeded. But what did you learn from your experience, whether you were successful or not? What would you do next time? And how could you face it better? What wisdom did God give you to help you, the one that you went through? I think it's helpful to actually kind of think about that. Will you be able to use what you've learned for something that's very similar? Now you're growing, You're in another trial. Wait a minute, I've been into something like this before. Okay, I can take what I learned and apply it here. And God can give me wisdom to make adjustments, and I can get through it. See, that's what happens in competition, You go through, what was your experience in the match play? How'd you do in the first set? How did you do in the third set? What strategies were successful? What didn't work? Why didn't it work? It worked against another player, but it didn't work against this guy. Why? What adjustments did you make? Was it helpful? Okay. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What do you need to work on? We can't avoid those weaknesses. We got to work on them. And how can we improve for the next match? So, a player doesn't change in one game or a season. Sometimes it takes a couple. But it's the same way in the Christian life. All right. With each trial that we have, we can learn through it. Okay. So remember what we're showing today so that we can refer to it rather quickly so that you can apply it to every trial that James talks about. Okay. Great truths. Read James 1 again. See you next time. Well, I took a lot from the sports world to try to illustrate how to go through trials in the Christian life. My take on it is, yes, we will fall on our face sometimes, but God can reach down and pull us up. So hang in there and be encouraged. We'll see you next time.